Hi everyone, this is Aki with another video on taxes, and we're going to go over tax mistakes. And these are math error mistakes, but really they're not just the typical math errors that you think about when you're thinking about grade school 2 plus 2 equal 5 situations, but rather tax adjustment. And they can contain a variety of things, and they can contain 5 main categories, which is like having the wrong tax amount, calculating the wrong tax amount, especially if you do anything on paper and yourself, claiming credits that you were already paid to use. So, for example, if you have received stimulus payment and you claim on your tax return that you have not, it will not match up with the IRS database, and they will send you a notice. Similar situation if, let's say, for child tax credit, last year people received some child tax credit prepaid to them during the year, and then they had to make adjustment on their tax filing. But some people said, I haven't received it, but according to IRS they have, so they will not match up. So there might be a math error notice from the IRS with an adjustment. There could be a wrong amount of earned income tax credit, which basically if you did any calculation yourself, you have to be aware that there's a different table for the EITC calculation, and it's an easy mistake to make. Number 4, it can be a standard deduction, additional standard deduction that people claim, but they shouldn't have. For example, there's additional standard deduction for blindness, and some people think, well, I can't see very well. Well, that might not be according to the IRS. There should be some kind of documentation saying that you are legally blind before you can claim that additional standard deduction. And finally, typical arithmetic mistakes such as, transposing numbers, adding zeros, putting the wrong number, the math error notices. In 2021 for the tax year 2020, IRS sent out about 11 million math error notices. So there's a lot of these notices that people can receive, and that's huge spike from the 2 prior years because of the pandemic and some of the tax law changes. So 80% of the 11 million that was sent out was related to stimulus payments. Math errors, like we talked about, are not just about arithmetics. They're just tax adjustment for a variety of issues. And here's a graph that shows you the spike in 2021, 11.1 millions. When you get a math notice, the math error notice, you have 60 days to respond. Notice should spell out what's the mistake and why you're getting a notice. Most of them do say what's the reason for the notice. However, not all of them. Some of them, they just have an adjustment. Say you wanted to call IRS and be like, hey, can you help me out? Can you explain to me? Well, guess what? 8% of the callers that call IRS in 2021 actually reached a person. How the math error notices are created. So basically IRS using a number of programs to check accuracy of tax returns. And one of them does check for math errors. And if there's some kind of calculation that's wrong, what happens is the computer basically will screen all the returns and then send out automatic notices without really having many humans or people who actually review it. So there could be a mistake on IRS part as well. So here's a graph that I want to go over with you. Even though this is 2010 data, on the left we have the number of notices in 2010 that were sent out. And we have 6,400 sent out that decreased taxpayer tax liability. That means the taxpayer refund would be increased or tax liability would be decreased. So be in taxpayer's favor. And 3,000, so half the amount of the ones that are sent in taxpayer favor, they would increase taxpayer tax liability. That means either they would have to pay more in tax or the refund would be decreased. So that looks great. However, the actual dollar amount of these notices, it's hugely different. So the notices in favor of taxpayers are $963. The notices not in favor are $3,180 on average. Obviously, this is average dollar value. So that means even though there's fewer notices that are not in favor of taxpayer, actually the dollar amount is larger. Number 1, calculating the wrong taxable amount. And whenever you receive income, some of it can be taxable and some can be tax exempt or tax free, especially if you're doing things by hand. And there's still 10% of taxpayers who do that. it can be very tricky because a lot of the calculations have to be done on one form, and that flows into 1040. And even if you're using software, some taxpayers try to do the calculation themselves instead of, let's say, entering the tax form as they receive it. Let me show you an example. So for example, this is 1040 for 2021. And when you scroll down and you start entering the income information, so from line 1 on, you have a lot of income information. And if you're entering it yourself, okay, from form W-2, it might be easy enough, but then when you start going to interest, dividend, IRA distribution, pension, and Social Security, the tricky thing that you have on the left side, all the amount that you are receiving, and then you have to specify how much of it was taxable. So that may involve calculation, so it's not so easy. And when you go to the instructions for 1040, you can see how in-depth they are and how confusing they are. I mean, we're starting with wages. Okay, that might be easy enough. But then when you start going to tax exempt interest, okay, that might be still like if you receive 1099 INT, OID, it would specify how much is tax exempt versus not. Qualified dividend, the same thing, 1099 div. Many times you specify how much is qualified dividend because that receives better tax rates, lower tax rates than ordinary dividend. But then when you start going to IRA distribution, pensions, and Social Security, it might not be so straightforward because they will involve some calculations. And many people can make the mistakes when they try to either not put the information exactly how they receive on the forms, or if they're doing by paper, they have to go to other forms and that calculation has to flow into. And that can also involve a mistake of transposing things when you're copying things between forms. The best advice is to basically use tax software. And I'm not trying to say use the paid software because there's also software that you can use for free using the IRS free file, or you can also go to free VITA, which is Volunteers for IRS Tax Assistance, and there's like ARP programs that can do the taxes for you for free. And you should try to avoid, doing things on paper because it's just so complicated. Number 2, claiming the recovery rebate credit or child tax credit that was already paid to you as not paid. So on your tax return, you mark it as you have not received it. You didn't receive any advanced child tax credit. But in IRS database, when they check their information, it actually shows that it has been paid. So let me show you with some examples here. So with the stimulus payments, it was complicated enough because there were 3 stimulus payments. On the tax return 2021, you can claim the third one. So basically, it was not a taxable payment to you. However, they do ask for the information when you're filing your tax return because they want to calculate, the IRS wants to calculate whether you should have received it, and if you should have received it but didn't, then they will pay you as a credit. That's what's called the recovery rebate credit. And that sheet, it's very complicated. In the 1040 instructions, look at this. How can, if you don't use software, if you're trying to do this by hand, this will take you some time and you have to be super careful. And then you have to move that information to the 1040. So really software, it just does that calculation for you. And many times, the deposits were directly made to your bank account. And some people, they didn't realize that and they've been using the money, but they were like, I didn't receive it. IRS was sending notices showing how much was paid to you because some people have not received the full amount. So there was another thing. That's why when you were supposed to put that in here, the information with your stimulus payment, how much you received to calculate the recovery rebate credit, if you received maybe half an amount because it was based on your income and some of it was phased out. But let's say you actually made less money in that year than IRS assumed, or they based it on prior information. So that's how the calculation is done. But, if people said, I didn't receive it because they think like, oh, I'll just receive it one more time. Guess what? Your tax return will be delayed. You might get a notice saying, okay, you filed it incorrectly, and it's just a hassle. Number 3, determining the wrong amount of earned income tax credit. Earning income tax credit is a very valuable credit because it's a refundable credit. That means you can receive it even if you have no tax due, no tax liability. However, there's like a lot of qualifications. So on the IRS website, there's a lot of rules, who can qualify and so on. I mean, people, as long as you have earned wages, that means not a passive income, not investment, not like interest from a bank or something or dividends, but actually going to work, you're getting W-2, or you have your own business, something that you have to provide services, do a labor, and so on. And even if you don't have no children, you can qualify, but there are different criterias. And some people don't understand how to calculate it because it's complicated. And if you go to, Form 1040, the earned income tax credit is right here on line 27A for 2021. And then if you go to instructions, okay, right here, starting with page 38, there is, look at this, how many steps and how many questions you have to answer to see if you qualify, because it depends on different situations. So there's like a lot of things you would have to answer. Most important thing, if you're doing in a software, it's much easier than doing the worksheets. So I would, encourage you to use a software, any kind of software. There's free software as well. At the end of it, on page 46, we have the earned income tax credit table. And this is basically, you see this table, it shows you that depends on your filing status. And so if you're married, single, head of household, and how many children you have, up to 3 maximum, you will have a different amount of earned income tax credit that you can receive. And that is also based on your amount of your income. So the income is on the left in these columns, and then across is your filing status and number of children. So it's very easy to take the wrong amount. If you're using a software and you provide information, let's say you're claiming a dependent and actually you shouldn't be claiming these dependents, or there's an issue with the dependents you're claiming, so you're claiming higher earned income tax credit amount than you actually should have received. So that's why you may receive, that math error notice saying you claimed the wrong amount of earned income tax credit. Number 4, claiming additional standard deduction for age or blindness or both, and not really qualifying for it because there are definitions and there are qualification requirements in order to claim that additional standard deduction. So the standard deduction, for example, for 2021 was, we have single married filing separately or single, 12,550, married filing jointly, qualified widower, 25,100, head of household, 18,800. However, you could also receive additional standard deduction, and that was 1,700 for single or head of household, and 1,350 for married filing jointly, married filing separately, and qualifying widower, that you would receive if you were over 60 file for that year. This is information for 2021, tax year 2021, and if you were blind. So if you were over 65 and blind, you would receive 2 of them. So for example, let's say, if you are married filing jointly, both are over 65, and one of them is blind, you would get the 25,100 standard deduction plus, because both of them are over 65, so 2 of the 1,350 plus one of them was blind, so we have 3 additional standard deductions. So that means, we have 25,100 plus 3 times 1,350, so it'll be 29,150. That will be a standard deduction for this couple that's married filing jointly. 2 of them are over 65, one of them was blind. And so, people would sometimes check this box when they're using the tax return form. Either they're using paper and they're doing it themselves, or they claim that they are blind and if they're using software. Most of the time, if you're using software, because you're putting your date of birth, that will be automatically calculated, so you won't be able to change it unless you change your date of birth. So that one is not as frequently happening. But with the blindness, there's actually a definition. Here's a definition from the publication 501, and there's also one that's in the 1040 instruction. But you see, it says if you are not totally blind, if you're aren't totally blind, you must get a certificate statement from an eye doctor stating that you can't see better than 20 to 200 in the better eye with glasses or contact lenses. So even glasses or contact lenses will not help you, basically. And your field of vision is 20 degrees or less. And your eye condition won't improve. And the statement should include this fact that saying it's not just like a temporary condition, it's something that it won't improve. And you would have to submit this, especially if it's your first year and you want to claim that. Number 5, arithmetic mistakes. So these are the mistakes when you think about it, usually when you think about math errors. The typical 2 plus 2 equal 5 situation, when you're adding numbers, they're not adding up. When you're transposing numbers, when you're adding zeros, maybe the numbers, you can't really read them very well and you put the wrong number instead. And we're going to go over an example to kind of give you an idea what I'm talking about. And these mistakes not necessarily have to be done on paper. You can just as well make them when using software, because if you're adding numbers at any point, if no one is double checking you and so on, you can transpose, add, put the numbers in the wrong box in the software and so on. So I have a 1040 here in with IRS forms and worksheet. There's a lot of referencing, there's a lot of subtraction, addition, comparison, smaller of, choose a number which is smaller. So a lot of things that you have to do in your head. Here I have a qualified dividend and capital gains tax worksheet, which is super complicated, which is why I chose it, because to show you that this is really not on your side, basically, when you start with this. So at the very beginning, it's asking me to go to 1040, look at line 15, bring that number here. So I have to go to 1040, find line 15, take that number and put it there. And let's say the number was 21,321. And by the time I got to the sheet, got to this side, somehow I transposed the 1 and 2, and 21,312 was the ending number. So I got all the numbers right, just not in the right place. So you can make a huge error if the numbers you transpose are the first ones and you're talking about thousands. And then software sometimes will pick up if anything was referenced from another place in the worksheet. And many times things flow through, but not always, especially forms that are less used. So you could still commit some errors in that sense. Then it's asking you, go back to 1040, look at line 3A, and then you have to bring that number here. Now you want to also make sure that you're using the 1040 for the same year as the worksheet, because things can change from year to year. So then you put that in. Then you usually ask questions, and usually depending on the answer to the question, different calculation is made. So here it's asking me a question, and then I take another thing that it's asking me to bring from line 1040. And then it's asking me to subtract. So there's a lot of subtraction, addition, comparison, and so on. And then let's say I subtracted, but somehow I calculated wrong because I was doing it in my head. So instead of 2756, I got 2760. So calculating numbers, calculation can be, even if you're using calculator on your phone, many times, sometimes it's something is in memory for the calculator, or you put in the wrong number, you can still calculate wrong. So you can see where I'm getting at. And this mistake is on top of my first mistake. So you can see it's like a domino. Then it's asking me, okay, enter depending on your filing status, this is the amount. And then it's asking me enter smaller of line 1 or 6. So now I have to go find line 1 and 6, 1, and compare it to 6. And then asking me to do what? Put a smaller of it. So, okay, put the one that's smaller. So simple enough, but you can see how our brain can just trick us, especially if you're distracted, if there's so much going on. Let's say I put that in, then it's asking me compare again. Guess what? You have to compare again, line 5 and 7 now. So now the number I put compared to 2 lines before it, then put that in. And then subtract. And let's say I subtracted, and instead of 552, I thought it was 882 because, I couldn't read my numbers very well. So that's another one. And we're not even halfway done, because you can even transpose things from form when you're putting it in the wrong box. These are basically the 5 math error or tax adjustments that you may receive an IRS notice about, So you just have to be aware, double check your work, double check your information, make sure you have everything ready when you're filing your tax return so you're not guessing. Thanks so much for watching.